To reread or not to reread? That is the question. Today I'm going to take you on my rereading journey. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and welcome to my rereading video. In today's video, I am going to share with you the journey I have gone on as a rereader. I haven't been a rereader for very long. I just have to state that up front. For the majority of my life, I was not much of a rereader. I could probably count on one hand the number of books I had reread, and it was probably more like this, maybe? It was a very slim number. Other than perhaps books I reread for college classes or perhaps for a book club, but other than that, I was never much of a rereader. To be perfectly honest, in prepping for this video, I went back because when I did this rereading challenge for myself, I did it when I just had a Bookstagram account, not a booktube channel. And so I was trying to see if I had posted anything specifically about what had prompted me to start this rereading journey. And of course I did not. I shared some of the books I was thinking about rereading, and I shared a wrap up at the end of the year with how many books I read and a photo of a stack of all of the rereads from that year, and yet no reasoning behind why I decided to do it. What I do recall, the thing that was the prompt for me, was having been on Bookstagram for quite a number of years. By that point, I think I had been on Bookstagram 4 or 5 years when I did this rereading challenge for myself. And I was always hearing people talk about the books they reread and how much joy that brought them and what comfort it was to reread. And I just kept kind of thinking about that and about how my reading life wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be at that moment in time, and that maybe what could help me get back to reading the types of books that I really love was to reread some of my favorites. That is, at least in my brain today, what I think was the prompt behind wanting to try doing more rereading than I normally do. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea now and set this down so that we can get into all the details from my rereading journey. It was towards the end of 2021 when I really started thinking long and hard about my reading life and what I wanted out of it and what types of books I really wanted to be reading. And I kind of felt like I needed to do a bit of an overhaul of my reading, that the books that I was picking up weren't resonating with me in the ways that I wanted them to, and that I wasn't enjoying. And I was finding myself having a lot of 3-star reads or DNFing, and something just wasn't quite clicking for me. I think I was paying too much attention to all the new and shiny books that were coming out, and a lot of those books just didn't work for me. They're just not the kinds of books I wanted to read. And once I really honed in on what I was looking for, then my reading life really started to kind of change. And part of what helped that was going back and rereading some favorite books. So for 2022, I challenged myself to reread. I think my goal was to reread one book per month in 2022. I ended up rereading 23 books that year, which was probably quadruple what I had reread in my entire life up to that point. I will insert a picture here of the stack of those 23 books that I read in 2022. And it was a lot of favorites. It was almost entirely favorite books of mine. It was a lot of Agatha Christie, it was a lot of Mary Stewart, and then it was just a number of other standalone books that I had read and loved throughout the years. And I really tried to reread books that were calling to me at that particular moment. And I thought I would just read to you what I wrote in my Instagram post wrap up of my rereading challenge from 2022. I said, I reread 23 books last year and every single one was just as wonderful upon a second read. Some were even better as my decades older self brought new insights to books I had read in my childhood, teens, and 20s. This has been such a wonderful reading project and one I will be continuing on with for the rest of my life. There is so much joy and comfort to be found in the pages of a book read again and again. I 100% stand by those words that I wrote back then. I still feel exactly that same way. So I said I was going to continue rereading, and I have. And in 2023, I had 20 rereads. In 2024, I had 17 rereads, and so far in 2025, I also have 20 rereads. And I will probably reread a couple of more books before the end of the year. I do have a couple planned for the holiday season that are holiday books that I enjoy reading over and over again. So I will definitely probably up that number by a couple more books before the year is out. I also wanted to share a little bit about why I wasn't a rereader for the majority of my life. And the reason I wasn't was basically what comes down to FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. It just always felt like there were so many books out there that I wanted to read that why would I spend time rereading a book I've already read when I could be experiencing a new book that I haven't discovered yet? That is all well and good. But I think it's important to note that we will never read all of the books we want to read in our lifetime. It's just not possible. There are so many books out there. And I think what I was discovering at the time I decided to start rereading was that some of those books that I thought I wanted to read, I didn't really want to read or I didn't enjoy once I picked them up. And so rereading really helped me focus in on the types of books I enjoyed reading and reminded me of why those books were so good and that those books were most certainly worthy of being reread again and possibly again and possibly again. And I think a really good book, as I've said on my channel before, is one that stands the test of time. Is this a book that I want to read in 10, 20, 30 years? And is it a book that others are going to be reading 50, 100, 150, 200 years from now? Now, there will certainly be books that won't be being read in 200 years that are still wonderful books and still deserving of us reading them at this moment in time. But I think there are books that can stand the test of time. And then I think there are some books that are good books now in this moment, and they may be very relevant to what's happening either in our own personal lives, in the world at large, but those books aren't going to have staying power over the long haul. Nothing wrong with reading those books. I love to read a book that is just light and frothy and forgettable as soon as I close the back cover. Sometimes that's just what you need, something that's just pure escapism. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. If that's all of what you read, great. You should enjoy your reading life 100%. But because I wasn't fully enjoying my reading life, at the time I decided to start rereading, rereading felt so refreshing at that particular moment. And some of my takeaways from rereading in that year, 2022, were both surprising and also shouldn't have been surprising. Isn't it funny how sometimes that is the way? If I could give one takeaway from that rereading experience, that first year of rereading, it would be that my favorite books are my favorite books for a reason, and they will stand up to being reread by me personally. They're not books that everybody is going to want to reread, but for me personally, they are books that are going to be ones that I enjoy at all kinds of different stages of my life. And so even though I read them as a child, a teenager, a young adult, I can still now read them in my 50s and enjoy them. And that was such a revelation to me. I don't know why, but it was. If you are a lifelong rereader, this is probably something you discovered a long time ago. I am very slow to discover things sometimes. I recognize that about myself. I am a slow learner about certain things, and this is definitely one of them. But as they say, better late than never. I think the best thing to come out of my rereading from 2022 was the discovery that rereading a book just felt so much cozier because I knew what to expect in the book. Even if I didn't fully remember the plot or the characters, I had a general feeling about the book. I remembered how it made me feel when I finished it, or looking back on it, just sort of that warm and cozy feeling I get from a book that I love, that when people ask me, what are some of the books you've loved in your life? These are the books that came to the top of my mind. And it was just so lovely to actually experience how cozy that feeling could be of getting back into a story that you already love. And again, another surprise, another revelation, and one that was a bit of a aha moment for me in 2022, and so necessary. Having come out of 2020 and 2021 and our pandemic that we all lived through, it just felt like I needed that kind of coziness and warmth and just escaping back into worlds that felt familiar and where I knew everything was going to be okay in the end. I think that's what I needed. I think maybe a lot of us needed that in 2022, didn't we? I know I certainly did. And then the final thing that I learned that really stands out to me is it's just such an interesting experience to reread a book, because at any given moment in your life, there are going to be different things in that same book that you focus on or that stand out to you, whether it's a particular character or a scene in the book or a theme of the book that maybe you didn't catch on to the first time you read it because you were really wrapped up in the plot. And I just think it's such a lovely experience to go back to a book and see what jumps out at you on any given read. And that can be really lovely and can suddenly bring something to the forefront that you hadn't noticed before that maybe really resonates with you at that moment in time. And I definitely had that happen to me and have continued to have that happen to me as I have kept rereading over these past few years. And that has just been so fun, just kind of see what my brain focuses on at this moment in my life and what things stand out to me when I close that back cover of the book and complete that reread, and just what my impressions are. And I have to say that every single book that I have read since I started this rereading journey, so now we're looking at almost 80 books that I've reread since I started this journey. Not a single one did I say, oh, this was terrible. Why did I think this was a favorite book of mine? Why did I like this? Why did I want to reread this? Not a single book. Every single book was just as wonderful, maybe more wonderful, maybe differently wonderful on my reread as it was the first time that I read it. I had a lot of trepidation about a reread ruining that first reading experience for me and no longer making this book one that I want to hug because I feel like all the books I choose to reread are ones that when I finish them, I kind of want to give them a hug because I just love them so much. But I found that not to be true. So if you have any kind of similar trepidations about rereading, I would urge you to let that go and maybe just give it a try. Now, before I try to convince you, if you're not a rereader, that you might enjoy rereading, I thought I would share a few standout rereads from the past few years. As I said before, every book that I've reread, I have thoroughly enjoyed. Yet, there are still a few that kind of rise to the top. They are sort of the creme de la creme of a very beautiful, delicious, wonderful crop of books that I have reread. But these are just skimming up at the top there. So I pulled 5 books that I thought I would share with you and talk a little bit about them and a little bit about what the rereading experience was like for each of them. First up is a historical fiction novel, and it is a book that I don't think I have ever heard anyone else talk about, but I absolutely love this book, and it's out of print now, which just makes me sad because it is such a lovely book. And it was actually reprinted by the Common Reader, which used to be a book catalog that I used to subscribe to, and that was how I didn't come across this book. My mom gifted this to me for Christmas one year, and I think it was either 1999 or 2000, because that's when this was republished by the Common Reader. And that book is Emerald by Elizabeth Luard. This is a reimagining, a sort of alternate history of King Edward VIII of England, who abdicated the throne so that he could marry Wallis Simpson, a divorcee, which was not done. This book imagines what if the two of them had had a love child, and this is before they got married, and they had sequestered that child away on the other side of the world, and she grew up not knowing whose daughter she was. And you follow along with her life, and a little bit you learn about Edward and Wallis and what's kind of going on with them, and just some of the things they do to prevent Emerald, our main character, prevent her existence for coming to light. And it's just so wonderful. I love Emerald as a character. I think she's fantastic, and I think this is such a well done book. I cannot recommend it enough. It makes me so sad that it's out of print, because I really feel like more people would love this if they could get a hold of it. And yes, so if you ever come across a copy of this somewhere, snatch it up. It is well worth a read. And I was so worried about rereading this book, because this was a book where I got it for Christmas, and then I think I read it in about 2 or 3 days. I just could not put it down. And I worried when I went to reread it that it was not going to live up to the own hype that I had in my mind. But it did. I didn't binge read it in the same way. I actually read it relatively slowly, like maybe over the course of a week or two. And it was just so wonderful to be immersed in this story and these characters, and to just revisit it from my older and perhaps somewhat wiser years. To look at Emerald and the situation from a much more grown-up perspective than when I first read it, which, I would have been in my early to mid-20s. So this is a delight. If you, like I said, can get a hold of it, I definitely recommend it. Also, if anyone has read this book, please let me know, because I never run across people who've read this book. Next up is a book that not only have I read it once since I first reread it, I have read it twice, maybe even 3 times, and it's a book that I am going to reread. I have a special spot in the year for it to be reread, and I'm going to explain that to you in just a moment. But without further delay, I'm going to stop teasing you with this, and I'm just going to say that book is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. And what is there to say about this book? It is pure delight. It is perhaps one of the best epistolary books, and it's not a novel. It is a true story. It is based on Helene Hanff's real-life correspondence with Frank Dole at Marks & Company, a bookstore in London, England, and she lived in New York City at the time, and they corresponded for years and years. She also corresponded with other members of the staff, and it is so charming, so wonderful. I couldn't love it more if I tried, and every reread, I'm just more enchanted by it and by Helene Hanff's voice. And this year, finally, I watched the movie version of this book with Anne Bancroft and Anthony Hopkins, which was also delightful, charming, heartwarming, so lovely. And I'll be rewatching the movie as well as rereading the book. And as for when I'm going to continue to reread this book, there was a bookstagrammer. I'm not even sure she has an account still. I will have to look into that. And if I can find her account and her name, I will reference it down in the description box below. But she does a read along of 84 Charing Cross Road every New Year's Day. And she just reads the book cover to cover on New Year's Day. Little bit of a binge read. Perfect way to start the new year. What could be more cozy and charming and heartwarming and uplifting than reading 84 Charing Cross Road on New Year's Day? And that is going to be my reread for New Year's Day or the first few days of the new year. Every year, going forward, as long as I walk on this earth. That is what I'm going to be rereading. So yes, and if anyone wants to join me in rereading this, we could do just kind of like a simple little read along. Maybe we could do a little live stream with some reading sprints or something like that. If anyone wanted to partake of that on January 1st, 2026, let me know in the comments and I will put something together for that. But that might be a fun way to kick off the new year. And whether you're rereading this or you would be reading it for the first time, I don't think you can go wrong with making this your first read of the year. I know I've said it before. It's delightful, it's charming, it's heartwarming. It's just the best. The best, the best, the best. My next two books are childhood favorites of mine that I reread and absolutely loved on rereading them, and they are still favorites. They are childhood favorites, they are adult favorites, they are lifetime favorites, and they are both such beautiful books, and I can't say enough good things about them. But the first one is, of course, Ballet Shoes by Noel Streatfeild. I read a number of the other shoes books as well, dancing shoes, theater shoes, skating shoes, on and on. I just read as many as my library had, which they didn't have all the skating shoes books, so I haven't read all of them. But Ballet Shoes is by far my favorite. And of course, I think it's most everyone's favorites of the shoes books by Streatfeild. And yes, so in this we follow three young girls who live together. They're not actually sisters. They are adopted by this older man whom they never see. He's always off gallivanting around the country, around the world. And so they're sort of raised by the people who work for him. And I think one of the things that I found so charming as a child was that their names were Paulina, Petrova, and Posey. And I just loved that alliteration. And I just was completely enamored of all three of them. I think throughout my entire first read of it, I bounced back and forth as to who was my favorite character. And honestly, I can't tell you where I landed. They are each wonderful in their own unique ways, and I love how they sort of each find their own little niche in the world and in the ballet world, and I think I was just very much drawn to that, and I'm still drawn to that as an adult. This book, it's so lovely, and I think this is 100% a book that adults can read and enjoy just as much as children can read and enjoy, and it really holds up to that, and we'll definitely be rereading this one again for sure. And then my second childhood read that was a real standout on my reread of it was, this is just a book that I think really made me fall in love with the coming of age story, and I still love that sort of sub-genre of books, and that book that made me fall in love with coming of age stories is Up a Road Slowly by Irene Hunt. This is actually my mom's paperback. It is very, very delicate. It is falling apart. It doesn't even have the back cover anymore. It fell off, I think, when I was reading it, and I probably threw it away. I have taped up the spine because it's all just completely falling apart. So I didn't actually read this edition on my reread. I purchased a new copy of it to reread because this is so delicate, and yeah, it can barely be opened or it's going to completely fall apart. But I want to keep this because it's so special to me. And in this we follow young Julie. She is sent after her mother passes away to live with her aunt, and her brother and her father live not far from where she lives with her aunt. but I think the feeling is that she needs to have a woman to bring her up, and so that is what happens. And so we just kind of follow along with Julie. She's fairly young when her mother passes away. I can't remember exactly how old, but we follow her up basically through high school graduation. It's such a lovely story. It is so wonderful. If you like things like Anne of Green Gables, you will 100% love Up a Road Slowly. It feels very much of that same ilk. I just love Julie as a character, and it is fun to go along with her and learn and grow. And I think my mom heart at this stage of my life was really drawn to Julie, that I wanted to sort of take care of her and help guide her upon this reading. I think when I read it the first time, I much more identified as Julie. And so it was fun on my reread to kind of feel differently about her, but still kind of same warm and cozy and sort of warm, fuzzy feelings about her, just from a slightly different perspective. So this is such a lovely book. And my final standout reread is another book that I don't often hear talked about, but is one that I absolutely love, and that is The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets by Eva Rice. And we follow Penelope Wallace. So this is another really coming of age type of a story. And Penelope lives with her widowed mother and her brother in this very crumbling mansion on the outskirts of London. And they don't have any money to speak of, so they can't fix it up. So it's really kind of just falling to ruin around them. And they kind of make do as best they can. And then Penelope meets this other young woman, Charlotte Ferris, who is sort of the life of the party. She's very outgoing. She knows lots of people. Her family is quite wealthy, and Penelope gets kind of sucked into Charlotte's world, along with Charlotte's brother as well. And we just follow along with what happens to both of them, and particularly Penelope, over the course of, I think it's about a year. And this book is just charming. It is so, so charming. If you like things like I Capture the Castle, if you like books written by Kate Morton, but wanted a little bit more of maybe coming of age, I definitely would recommend this book. I think it has a similar tone to it. There's not much of a mystery. I mean, there's a little bit of some things that you find out kind of towards the end, but there's just something about the writing style reminds me a bit of Kate Morton. And yes, I love this. It is so, so wonderful. And it was equally wonderful on my reread. Once I started it, I could not put it down, and I think that's very, very high praise, especially for a book I am reading for the second time. So I highly recommend this if you've never read it. Did I say that about every book on this list? Well, they're all wonderful. So I stand by what I said. And that kind of wraps up my personal rereading journey. I have had a number of you, when I talked about rereading, when I've mentioned it in past videos, ask me about rereading. A number of you have said you aren't rereaders. Some of you have told me you are very big rereaders. You've been rereading all your lives. So I feel like rereading, we kind of run the gamut. You know, some people are strong rereaders and some people are very much not. And I'm not trying to convince anyone who says absolutely no, that they're not interested in rereading. That is, of course, your prerogative. You should read what you want to read. But if there's something inside of you that thinks, maybe I might enjoy rereading, then what I'm about to say is for you. So I'm just going to say, try it. Just try it. Pick one book that you have read that you have loved, that you can't stop thinking about, that's just always in your mind when people ask you, what are some of your favorite books? Pick one of those books and try rereading it. I promise you, I don't think you will be disappointed. It may be a different experience from your first time reading it, but I think you will still love that book if you loved it the first time you read it. Now, if you're saying to yourself, but Jen, there's so many books out there to read. Even if I just reread one book, that's going to take up time. I could be reading something else. So here's what you could do. You could wait until you are in a bit of a reading slump. Because one of the things I have found over these past few years is that if I'm really in a slump, rereading will help get me out of it because it's already a book that I know I love. So I pick something I'm in the mood for and I reread it. And I can't tell you how many times that has just helped lift me out of that slump and kind of guide me into what kind of books I want to be reading, just by rereading something that I already know and already love. So that's another way to do it. And then thirdly, you could also try rereading when you're feeling like it's all just too much. The world is too much, life is too much, everything feels like chaotic, you just have so much going on in your life. Pick up a book you've already read because one, if you don't concentrate on it quite as much, that's going to be okay because you already know the gist of the story. So if you miss a little bit here and there, you'll still know what's going on. And two, again, I think rereading can help calm and soothe us because we're being invited back in with characters that we already love, with a storyline that we know is going to work out okay. Maybe don't pick something that has a tragic ending if that's what your mood is. But I think there is more calm and gentleness in rereading than there is in reading a book for the first time. Even if it's by an author who is relatively cozy and comforting to begin with, you still don't know exactly where the story is going to go, but when you're rereading, you do. And so you can just kind of settle in for the ride. And I think sometimes that's helpful when your life feels a little bit too much at the moment. And maybe that's taking its toll on your reading life and you don't want that to be happening. So just some possible ideas for how you could incorporate rereading into your life. As to then how much you decide to reread or not reread is really up to you. For me personally, as I have gone along these past few years, in the back of my mind, I'm always saying to myself, I would like to reread about one book a month. Now, as you can tell from these statistics I gave you earlier, I have definitely gone above and beyond that every year since I started my rereading journey, and that feels very good to me. But even if I just reread 12 books in 1 year, that would feel just wonderful and feel like I am spending time with old friends in places that I love and just getting all that good cozy vibes from those books. So, but again, you could say I'm going to reread 2 books in a year. 1 book in the first part of the year and 1 book in the second. I'm going to reread a book a quarter. I'm going to reread a book a month, or I'm just going to reread whenever the mood strikes me. And maybe some years that's 5 books and maybe some years it's only 2. I think you, as always, should read what you want, when you want, how much you want. I know we can't always read exactly how much we want because wouldn't we just read all the time if that was the case? But absolutely you should do what works for you. And again, you can never read all of the books that are out there in the world that you want to read in what remains of your life, no matter how many years you have left, right? We're all going to shuffle off this mortal coil, as they say, without having read every book we wanted to read. And that's okay. That's just the way it is. But I think there's something to be said for having reread those books and found additional comfort and joy in them in different parts of our lives. And I recommend giving it a try. I didn't think it was going to be for me, and I was 100% wrong. And I admit that. And I now officially proclaim that I am a rereader. I'm proud of it. And that is it for my rereading journey video. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how I have gotten into rereading in the past few years, and let us chat all things rereading down in the comments. I want to know which of you are lifelong rereaders. What are some of your favorite books you've reread in the course of your life? I would like to know if you're not a rereader, why not? Or is it something you're open to? And if you were sort of like me, kind of an on the fence rereader, not really sure one way or the other, I'd love to know if maybe this video has convinced you to at least give it a try once. Let us chat all things rereading down in the comments below. And I've been trying to think of what kind of emoji would be good if you don't really have anything you'd like to add, but you want to let me know you were here in the comments. And I'm just going to say, leave whichever emojis you'd like, but leave 2 of them. So if you want to leave me 3 emojis, leave 6 actually, 2 of each. Like rereading, right? So like doubling up on each. Does that make sense? I think so, yes. So yes, if you don't have anything you'd like to add, definitely leave those double emojis down in the comments below. I would love to see those. I love knowing you were here and you watched the video. And as I've mentioned, comments really, really do help my channel. And as do likes and subscribes. So if you enjoyed this, I would love it if you could hit that like button and then subscribe and stick around. I would love to have you join my bookish community. Thank you all so, so much. I have really been enjoying all of the comments and discussions that we've been having on my recent videos. I uploaded a few extra videos last week, so I am still playing catch up on comments. So if I haven't gotten to you yet, I will very, very soon. But please know that I read all of your comments and I appreciate them so much, and I will get back to you. And thank you all so much for being here and spending time with me in my cozy corner of booktube. And as always, I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye.